you want Dirty Harrys on the street sitting at a hot dog shop, you know, and knowing before they've even sat down that they're going to have to walk outside and create a massive action movie shootout and then walk away with just some buckshot on your leg. You know, like, you got to have those people on that wall. You need to have a few good men in this world, even if they are bad people. And Harry Callahan, maybe not a bad person, not the best, but he's the hero that the 70s needed. And he set the tone for all kinds of different characters over the years. The anti-hero, the anti-authoritarian, you know, like you don't have John Wick, you know, unless you have Dirty Harry to begin with. The people who made this movie had a worldview very different from the critics of the time and very, very different from the critics of today. So there might not be a future within, you know, cinema to appreciate this movie, but I think people should just watch it, enjoy it for what it is.
Film podcast. I am Matt, and that is Chuck, and this is episode number 2. Today we begin our 4th director retrospective by going back further than we've ever gone before, to the 1970s. Those far out times when serial killers stalked the streets, free love was threatening your marriage, and your kids were turning into drugged out hippies. And there was only one man to stop it all. That's right, we're reviewing Dirty Harry in part 1 of our look at the films of Don Siegel. Back in the present, we've got one massive news umbrella story to cover. Turns out, it's rush week at Disney. Did your favorite corporate stooge make the cut? Then in the watch list, this week marks the return of 2 of our favorite TV shows. And as always, this all precedes the mentionable and Chuck and I naming our picks of the week. Timestamps are below in the episode description. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. But that's the business end of the show. Chuck, I'll turn it over to you.
There's just something about the decade of the 70s. You know, like, there's something in the air. Lalo Schifrin music is just... He just did the soundtrack for that whole decade, I feel. Even though it began in the 60s. But the man did some crazy things. He was pretty far out with his work in this movie. I'll say that as a teaser. But yeah, you did not want to be one of those poor losers who got a pink slip at Disney, because it's the Ides of Mouse. It's all coming to an end. If you were around for a decade, if you were around for a week, it didn't matter. You were getting the cut. You were getting the boot, and or something. But we don't really know what's going to happen with this man quite yet. We're just going to say this right now, right off the bat. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty bullshit. Like, we're not going to be looking at affidavits. I do that on my day job, thank you very much. I don't need to read his police report. All I care about is, well, aren't they just going to do the obvious thing and just do some wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey bullshit and just slap someone else in there? Why don't they?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it all has to do with timing, because if this exact same event, so what we're talking about here, just
Jonathan
to give
Majors.
the most, Jonathan Majors, the most basic version of the story. Last Saturday night, he was arrested for assault against his girlfriend. They've done a really, really bad job of keeping her identity secret, because they were supposed to, but it's clearly his girlfriend that he was, had these charges brought against him for. And since then, there's been very little movement legally about this. So that's kind of everything we know for a fact. I mean, there's all this other stuff out there now. His lawyer is running like major damage control and releasing text messages now. But
big mistake. She is fucking everything up. His lawyer,
yeah, probably.
We'll leave that for the drama channels. But yeah, that's just my point of view on it.
But so what I was saying is it all has to go to do with timing, because had this event happened but just transplanted in like late January or like the beginning of February, 100% he would have been fired by now, because that would have been the lead up to the latest Ant-Man movie, and they would have been forced to make a decision. And because we're kind of in the post Ant-Man 3 world now, where Disney has made 95% of the money they're ever going to make on that movie has already been made. And so they have a little bit of time here to just kind of simmer on this and let things play out. And then, they'll make a decision before the next time we see his character, which will be Loki season 2, which was going to come out this summer, but I think that is now probably in jeopardy even. So, I guess that's kind of where I sit on why he hasn't been fired yet. But yeah, what do you think?
On one hand, I do think that maybe they took a look at what happened with the quick dismissal of Justin Roiland and how that whole thing worked out. But what's crazy about that is that was a court case that had been quietly and outside of anyone's eye been happening for like a year or so. And this is something we knew about the moment it fucking happened. So it's going to take even longer for whatever happened here to work itself out. And I think unless they have him like dead to rights on a morality clause violation, because in the post Me Too Hollywood, morality clauses exist in much the same way as they did back when the church ran things. But in this instance, I'm not gonna go men's rights activist on it here, but it almost does seem like to an extent that maybe like protocol and just like woman calls police and there might have been abuse going on, by default the man is arrested. That's what happens in New York State, and and that has its own problems. But the reality of it is, it could have been something that she maybe was just having a psychotic break, and he called the police about it, and now he's paying the consequences for it. Should he have everything stripped from him? I don't think so. But whether or not Disney's going to do it, I think they absolutely are. But it's unfortunate, because he was the one thing that this whole phase 5-4 had going for it. He was the only interesting thing, and he was the through line from the TV to the cinema. And now it's just this big question mark. And, well, I guess we're going to have to see, because like there's a whole culling happening across, the whole company, essentially, at this point. If you're a TV project like Loki, yeah, it's suspect. They might just cut their losses there and like leave him out of it and just rewrite it so that they can still get it out. But TV isn't really making them money anymore. They're not getting the Disney Plus subscription numbers that they would like, from what I gather, from what I've been hearing.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. If, hypothetically, say, he does get fired, what do they do? Like, what do they do? Because they've been, they're still in the beginning stages of building up this villain as sort of the Thanos of these next 3 phases. And so what do you think Disney should do as far as their villain problem?
That's a good question, because either you find a totally new villain, or you just say, oh no, like it's actually this incarnation that looks like this that you have to worry about, and it's not the Jonathan Majors Kang anymore. It's Michael Fassbender with blue paint on, or something like that. Like they just find some other actor to stick into the role. But they could also just go completely crazy and just go with the new villain. Just find a totally different villain to be the big bad, and just have this whole thing be a unfortunate exercise in futility as far as the storytelling is concerned. Was there anything else you wanted to say about this situation before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to give my thoughts on that last point. So like basically they could. I mean, Disney has experience with this with Don Cheadle and Terrence Howard, so they can just pull one of those and act like nothing ever happened. But, Ant-Man ended on them defeating Kang. So, in all, likelihood, they could just act as if Kang was the villain for that movie and then just say that those after credit scenes at the end of Ant-Man are just a wash. And, you just wash them out and pretend like they never existed. And, Kang was the villain for Ant-Man and just Ant-Man. So they could do that, but I think they should, nobody really liked Ant-Man, and a lot of people are very down on the MCU right now between that movie and Eternals and all of the TV shows. And so, in some ways, they could use this as an opportunity to revitalize the MCU by doing Doctor Doom, because that's what they really should have been doing this whole time, is Doctor Doom. That's what everybody wants. That's what everybody's been calling for, and for some reason, they've had him on the back burner. I feel like they are gonna get to him eventually, but I think now's the time. Yeah.
It's like, unless they're gonna pull Galactus out of their fucking asses, and just go full Fantastic Four on this. But we need a Fantastic Four movie to do that. So they're just kind of full of shit, in my opinion. They need to figure their shit out, whatever it is, because there's no coherence to this storytelling, no urgency to it either, and that's been the biggest beef I have with a lot of Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm projects. I'm looking at you, Mandalorian. You're getting really fucking boring. But that's a different conversation. The major problem for Marvel going forward is that they are losing one of their key cogs in the machine. The thing that kept those grubby little animators working at their workstations, pumping those pixels out and getting those giant, widescreen comic highlight reels going. And, that lady was Victoria Alonso, and she has an interesting career. She was an actress who realized, oh, I have no power. So then she became a producer, and somehow became like the post-production executive for fucking Marvel. And now she's not, because apparently she violated her contract by promoting a movie she produced that, was Oscar nominated, Argentina 1985. And this is a juicy little story. It's very funny. It's very weird that this is so brazen and out in the open like this, because Disney was just like, yeah, she's fucked. She's gone. She's chopped liver. We're done with her forever. Fuck her. And now lawsuits. Like, how many lawsuits is this company gonna have to deal with just to get rid of all the administrative bloat they apparently have?
Oh man, it's gonna be rough. Speaking of rough, did you read like the Vanity, or no, it wasn't Vanity Fair, it was Variety, the Variety article about this?
Yeah.
How absolutely brutal that opening paragraph was, because I would encourage anybody to go look at it right now, because it's basically, they recall this story recently from the premiere of, oh God, what was it? It might have been...
it was Argentina 1985, wasn't it?
Yeah, and she was on the red carpet, and she saw that two of the photographers on the red carpet were females, and she called them over and made them take pictures with her, and then she said, like two women photographers, us women, we aren't going anywhere, and then 8 days later, she's fired. It's just absolutely brutal how they framed the whole article on Variety, but... it's kind of, I mean, it makes sense. She was running the VFX department into the ground. People have been complaining all over, the complaining parts of the internet, like Reddit and 4chan and stuff, about their jobs, their VFX jobs, and how, Marvel was running them into the ground, after hours, late hours, bad pay,
death schedules. It's the Baton Death March of visual effects animation. And now, a lot of those companies are being like, yeah, we're not going to fucking work for you anymore, Disney. Get fucked. Oh, you need Mando to look good? We're not going to do that for you anymore because of this lady.
And so she ran that department into the ground, and, beyond that, I don't know, she's out there saying, like, accusations of sexism, accusations of racism, but it's like, I don't know if that really holds water, because why then did they allow you to work at this company for 17 years and then just suddenly like, oh, we're racist now, we
Yeah,
just decided we're, so it's like
because
that doesn't
yeah,
really hold water.
because here's the deal: they took her and Kevin Feige's cue on who to hire. Like, like all of the people who populate Marvel Studios, are there because they agree and think exactly like Alonso and Feige do. Like they are prophets of the message, as it were. And the message will carry on forward, and that message is very progressive. That message is exactly her values and her virtues, despite bumping heads with the state of Florida and, like those political realities. But yeah, like it makes, no, this company is totally down for her identity politics. They just didn't think she did a good job, and they had cause to show her the door. So yeah, this lawsuit is going to be quite frivolous when it gets right down to it. But I believe she has hired the same attorney as our next segment. Okay. If you're ready to move on to it. Because Kathleen Kennedy also had a pretty fucking bad month. This is kind of old news for the internet. But, Kathleen Kennedy is also getting sued by a producer named Karen McCarthy. And Karen McCarthy and Victoria Alonso have the same lawyer. And that is, well, also chef's kiss today. But Kathleen Kennedy is in deep trouble. She hired this lady she wooed her, she courted her, she stole her from Apple TV Plus, because they have a show with Colin Farrell called Sugar, a detective series that they were like, hey, come work for us. And she was like, actually, I got a better offer. I'm going to work in Star Wars, multi-year contract, all those royalties and residuals. She's going to have it made. She's going to be one of the most powerful female producers in the industry. And then after like relocating and like signing, I think contracts were signed, she was working. They were just like, no, you're fired. We don't want to move forward with this contract. Here's $5,000.
Yeah. Apparently she did 1 day's work. She literally worked for 1 day on the show, and then and then they're just like, here's $5,000, and see you later. And
see you later.
And I don't know. This is like, I think out of all these stories, this is probably the one that I have the least to say about, only because Kathleen Kennedy has been a monster for a long time, and this is just her continuing to be a monster and continuing to run Star Wars into the ground. And and for that matter, probably Indiana Jones too. I mean, we'll see, but
if you believe the scuttlebutt from the completely unverifiable and like weirdo sets of YouTube commentators and like rumor mongers like Doomcock or like Midnight's Edge, they have been feasting on this. But then I remind myself, these are the same dudes who have been telling me for 5 years that this woman was going to be shown the door, and it hasn't happened. Like, how long can she keep getting away with it? It's like, she is like Donald Trump. It's like, when is she going to get indicted? Oh, maybe soon. But when you get down to it, she is in control until her contract is up, from what I understand. And it was just a question of, well, am I going to get all of my shows out so I can maximize my golden parachute, or what? And if you believe the rumor mongers, Iger had a one-on-one with her and made it clear that she was going to be taken, out and skinned if, Indy 5 didn't turn a profit, because nothing she also, one of the other things is getting an actual Star Wars movie in theaters before 2024, and there's no human way that can happen. No, it's not feasible. 2025, because the gears aren't moving. It's not obvious that they have anything in place for the theater anymore for Star Wars, because they keep on canceling those projects. Like D&D, Benioff and Weiss were going to be doing a Star Wars thing. Rian Johnson was going to be doing a Star Wars thing. 3 or 4 other people have had Star Wars projects lined up and go away. And it's like, well, who is doing anything with Star Wars besides Filoni and Favreau? And I'm losing faith in those guys too. Like, Gilroy's the only reason for me to come back.
Yeah. It continues to be a huge miracle that, that show even is still a thing, because at this point, Star Wars, for the most part, other than Gilroy, is such like it's a tainted like product. And I see all these announcements for these directors that are signing up to do Star Wars stuff,
Like the
that
Daniels.
skeleton. Yeah, Daniels.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you doing? You're going to destroy your career before it even began. And like, yeah, Daniels. And then the other day, what's his name? Green Knight guy, David Lowery, signed up to do a couple episodes of that same show, Star Wars Skeleton Crew. And so it's like, you wonder what these guys are thinking, and it's probably the money.
It's probably what it is. So let's move on from Kathleen Kennedy, because they just keep on coming. Our man with the plan on the inside, Mr. Toy Biz himself, Ike Perlmutter, his reign of terror has finally ended. He finally got dusted, as it were, because these aren't the only layoffs. Like, there's like 6,997 other people who lost their jobs. Yeah. But like, why did it take so long to wrest this man, from the control panel of Marvel? Like, how is he dug in so tight?
I'm guessing that it probably has to do with his position going into the Disney buyout of Marvel, because if people don't know, Perlmutter was like the chairman of Marvel when Disney bought them, and I'm sure he stipulated all of these things in his contract after Disney bought them. And basically he was in charge of Marvel Studios, or he had a big hand in Marvel Studios up until about 2015, and then Kevin Feige basically showed him the door, and they created a new like basically a token division called Marvel Entertainment that was literally just like toys and comics. And they basically just were like, hey, go do your thing over there. Well, we don't pay attention to you, essentially. And so he's been doing that since 2015. And word on like the street is that he's always been trying to get back at Feige. He's tried to get him fired multiple times. And then he was also he was the guy who was backing this attempted coup that happened back in February. And so he's stirring up too much shit. And Iger's back now for his 2-year stint that he's going to do now before he goes back into retirement. And Iger just wants to, probably wanted to get him out before his stint is over. And he's been a really bad influence on this entire company for the longest time. And it's good that he's gone, because he's like notoriously cheap, where he would make people like reuse like Post-it notes and like other office supplies. Yeah, and like paper clips. And he also said that like nobody's interested in a Black Panther movie or like a Captain Marvel movie, and he wrong about that. Yeah, extremely wrong. And so it's good he's gone.
But we feel kind of bad for everybody else, because like this is it's across all the divisions of the company, right? It's not just strictly Disney. It's Lucasfilm lost some, Marvel lost some, theme parks lost some. So yes. And a lot of this is, and also a lot of like thousands of those people were in their meta division, actually, like the metaverse. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah,
I know you are.
Like their VR division.
Yeah, because the whole world is bailing out on Zuckerberg's little project. They all were into it until they realized that no one fucking uses it. And so, yeah, all those people who were busy getting all that shit ready for the Disney metaverse are now, job searching, and everything that they've been doing for the last year is a dead industry, unfortunately. Because, VR hasn't taken off quite enough that, everyone is more excited about looking at Nintendo Wii graphics right in front of their eyeballs. Because that's what it reminded me of. But golly, that was a barn burner. That's the Ides of Mouse, the Night of the Long Knives. Everybody got a little bit of what little Bobby was throwing out there. And David Zaslav is just fading in the back, just like, I was right. He set the tone for the whole industry last year when he started gutting Warner Brothers, and Iger realized he needed to do the same thing. Time to move on to the watch list. Speaking of gutting your corporate enemies, Succession is back. And it is, back with a vengeance, but it was melancholy. I'm just going to put that out there. Watching, Roy try and get all of his like toadies to banter with him and crack jokes like his kids always used to, because he kept them around because they kept things fun and whatnot. And now that he just has all these sycophants that don't challenge him and don't provide him anything that he can enjoy, so he's more miserable now than he ever has been in his life. That's my feeling after this first episode. But overall, how did you receive it?
Yeah, I mean, this was, it's a return to form, and I will say that there's two types of Succession episodes. There are the episodes that are just like completely incredible all the way through, and then there are episodes that are kind of slow to start, but then they ramp up and they ramp up and they ramp up, and by the end they're just amazing. And that's kind of like what this episode was, where it's the first episode of the season. We get a lot of sort of introductory scenes with the Roy children, just talking about their new company, what they are going to do, what they aren't going to do. And then, I think the episode really hit its stride once, like, Logan, he's watching his sort of world crumble around him. And, he goes to a diner with Colin, his bodyguard, and that scene is, so incredible. Just like, you're my pal, right? You're my pal. And then he asks the guy a question and doesn't even let him get a word out before he just interrupts him again. And it's just brutal. And and speaking of brutal, oh my God, that final scene.
Yes. Oh, that hurt so good though. Those fuckers, those two people needed to just do that. Because I'm just going to put this out there. There's a reason why, fidelity is important in a marriage, no matter what, even if you are in an open relationship, you got to be faithful in your own fucking twisted way. And these two individuals were, bound to reach this moment from the episode 1 when they first showed up on this fucking show. I knew that this moment was coming, especially after how last season ended. But God, no, it just stopped being fun. Him and Greg being the disgusting brothers. Once it was like, oh no, they have really just sullied, and rich people are gross, man. That's this show reinforces that to an enormous degree, but that moment was devastating. I loved it so much.
Yeah, it was just like the perfect end cap to that episode, because they're just two people who, they're both, there's so much left unsaid there when they should be talking, and they just don't commiserate. They're clearly so terrible for each other, but they don't want to admit it. But then at the same time, they don't want to, they do want a divorce, but they don't want a divorce. It's just an awful situation all the way around. And but that was great. And and then I love the scene with the Pierce family, where Nan Pierce has to pretend like she's disgusted by the wheeling and dealing, and she's just oh, this is so disgusting. I'm a working class liberal, and this is disgusting. But then they say 10 million or 10 billion, and her eyes go wide, and she's like, that'll do fine.
That's a hell of a deal, man. That's great for them. So we know this. So now we're just counting down. It's finally sinking in for me. How many episodes are left? 9. Oh God. So what's the trajectory here? Because now they have, if I'm remembering the episode right, they now own it, right? Or at least they're going to. The paperwork still needs to be signed, but now they have a competing enterprise to their father, essentially, and they have some liquidity now, or some whatever. Some stakes to even go and take another run at buying him or some shit like that again. So I don't know. I really want to see them get this fucking white whale and just put the old man to bed by the end of the show. But I almost have the feeling that they're not going to do that. Something's going to go wrong.
Well, that's kind of always, that always seems to happen is, somebody, whether it's, Kendall or anybody, it's most of the time it's Kendall, thinks that he's about to get a leg up on his dad, and then he doesn't, because his dad is always just 2 steps ahead of him. And I was looking at just as far as the season is concerned, the next episode is called Rehearsal, And then the third episode of the season is called Connor's Wedding. So that's what we're going to get for the next 2 episodes. We're going to get the rehearsal dinner probably, and then the actual wedding in the third episode. So then everybody's going to have to come together again.
So thank you for bringing up Connor, because, oh my God, that scene where he's talking about spending another $100 billion to hold his 1% of the delegates for his presidential campaign, and like Willa's just sitting there just like just like having to just like live with the fact that all that money's just evaporating in front of their eyes. Yeah. Oh, it was so good. It hurt so good. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm very happy that this show has returned. I can't wait for it to get even more brutal and gonzo as it goes along.
Yeah,
same. But now we have to talk about a show that's on the rise, where this is the twilight of, one of the heavy hitters that we've had the last 4 years of the COVID era, as it were. But now we also have the new hotness, the Yellowjackets. They're back on Showtime. And we finally know who was the first one to take the first bite of flesh. And I'm going to leave it there. But I'm very glad that we're moving things along enough to the point where we're going to, where the cannibalism is going to start, because that's the only reason I'm here.
Have you, just so I know, have you seen episode 2 yet?
Not yet. Okay. I haven't had the time to see it. Did that come out last night?
Yes. Yeah. So okay. I'll tell anybody who's watching.
We're recording this on Saturday.
Yes. And you can actually add, I was able to add Showtime to my Paramount Plus subscription for literally $1. Like it went from $10.99 a month to $11.99. Not sure if that's like a promo they're only doing for a certain amount of time, but all I know is that it's $1 more, and it's in perpetuity, I think, for me anyways.
Holy
and then
shit.
the episodes, the cool thing about this is that the episodes come out on Fridays on the app. Whereas if you watch the show on, TV on cable, you have to wait till Sundays. So it's kind of cool to see them early. But as far as this first episode goes, you know what? I'll say I think that episodes 1 and 2, it should have been one of those situations where they premiered both episodes on the same night, because I found the first episode to be kind of like low energy and like I don't know, just not, when you take a show and you leave so many things on a cliffhanger at the end of one season, when you pick up with the next season, you better start answering questions, and I don't think they really did with that first episode. And so, I don't know, I found it sort of almost as if it should have been tacked on to the end of last season. And episode 2 is more like the real season opener for this season, because let me tell you, episode 2 is nuts, absolutely nuts. Like, I'm really excited for you to watch it, because I don't want to spoil it, but the final scene of episode 2 is, if you thought that ear eating scene was bad, the last scene of episode 2 is that, but times 100.
Fuck so. Yeah, bro. Okay, I'm here for it. I am amped, because I had been seeing some scuttlebutt, from like the Yellowjackets subreddit about some of the things happening, but I've been trying to hide myself as much as I can, from spoilers in that regard. However, I do want to bring up, like, just to echo, like, you are right. This first episode feels like they should have done a Sam Levinson and had like, it's a special episode in between the seasons, like he does with Euphoria. Where you kind of bridge the gap a little bit and then have a proper, true, season premiere, following it up. Like, I actually don't mind that kind of a format, because there's a lot of ground they have to cover to make us okay with the cliffhanger they gave us at the end and wherever they're going to be going with it next. Because just hearing the voice of what's his name? I can't think of his name because he wasn't in the episode. But Elijah Wood. Hearing Elijah Wood's voice, but not getting to see him was such a cock tease, and it bugged me. I wanted to see more of him. but I do want to shout out my favorite moment from the first episode is Cucked Jeff coming back from like raiding his wife's lover's like art shed where he had all of the portraits he made of her, and jamming out to some Papa Roach, tore my life into pieces, this is my last resort, in his car, like a proper white American male. It was just hilarious. And it was, just kind of meandering after that. But as far what do you think of the new characters, the new girls? Do they actually find a place to belong, or are they clearly just the ones who get chopped up and eaten?
I'm glad you brought that up. I was totally going to bring those people up. Yeah, how they're suddenly giving the red shirts of the Yellowjackets universe like lines of dialogue and like names. Tiny little names and little plot details, like Soup Girl, who's always making the soup for everybody, and they're clearly all probably going to die, I'd imagine, and they're just trying to give them some bit of character development before we see them chopped up into pieces. That would be my guess, but the one thing I did want to mention is I do like the stuff that they're doing with Shauna's husband and stuff. I mean, that guy is like one of the MVPs of this show, along with Christina Ricci's adult Misty, because I feel as if, and it's always been this way, where the teen girl timeline is way more interesting to me than the adult's timeline. But I feel as if that gulf is getting bigger now, where I like the cabin teen timeline so much more than the adult stuff. And every time the adults come on screen, I don't know, I'm just kind of like, like this is fine, but I would much rather go back to that cabin. And
it's too much of a soap opera. It's its problem.
Yeah.
If it had the same edge and urgency that it should have edge and urgency, because the flashback sequences do. Like, they're just too settled and they're too comfortable and like laissez-faire about everything that happens around them. Like, oh yeah, my wife who's acting really freaked out about me won't even let me like talk to my son at school. Like, oh, why is she freaking out? Oh, it's the weird altar with a dog's head that I've been keeping in my basement. With my alternate personality has been keeping in the basement. There should be more from like a reaction and like a response to that than just because they just do react faces in the present, and it's just soap opera bullshit. Like, I'm sitting there watching them in the art shed getting all of his paintings out of there, the dead lovers' paintings, Shauna and Jeff, and I'm just like, why are you fucking in the plate? Why are you leaving DNA? Like, I was just getting all what's the term that they use in this for investigators, like online investigators or like internet sleuths, like all of those people,
like armchair detectives
are just like these fucking idiots. Like, they're leaving a breadcrumb trail right to them. Like, why you busting a nut in there? Like, fucking the car. Like, what? Come on. But other than that, like, it's there's a lot of things like that are just leave you wondering, like, okay, do they have different people working on the different parts of the show? Because writing rooms are kind of amorphous. It's just a blob of people coming up with a product. And it really does feel like they have the wrong sort of people. Like, they need to diversify a little bit. Move some of the soap opera people to the past to lighten the mood a little, maybe, but not too much. And then get those edgy folk who actually know storytelling in the future, setting the tone. Because I don't know, these showrunners are high on their own supply. They think they are so goddamn clever. And like, they engage way too much with their fan base, in my opinion. And entertain their theories a bit too much. And I just worry that we are in another Lost situation.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see it turning out that way. But especially, I mean, again, once you watch episode 2, they start bringing back the supernatural stuff again.
Good.
Or the maybe supernatural stuff. I mean, you don't know if they're just tripping out on drugs off mushrooms or if there's shit actually going on. But I don't know if you had any predictions about where the show's going to go, but I have 2 that I want to get out there. The first one is, I think that Shauna's daughter is gonna factor in somehow a lot more into this season because they're giving her a lot more screen time, and it makes me wonder. I don't know if they've ever actually addressed this, but is Shauna's daughter in the present timeline? Is she the one who was born at the cabin?
No, she could not have been. Because
Oh,
based on where they are in the present, like that child would be in their 20s.
okay, okay,
This
interesting.
has been well thought
Okay.
about by the fan base. She is not the wilderness baby, and the big mystery is what happens to it.
Okay, okay, okay. So that,
Do
yeah,
they
I
eat the
guess that,
baby, Matt? Do you think
yeah,
they eat the
maybe.
baby?
Oh God, it could happen. I could see it happening, but yeah, there's something going on with her character because they're giving her a lot more screen time this season, and they're gonna do something with her daughter in some way. And then also, my other sort of big prediction is that Javi is going to come. He is alive, and he is going to come back into the fold of the girls because I think they're setting that up because they need to give Lottie. They need to give everybody else a reason to follow Lottie, to believe that because she's the one who's saying that Javi is alive while everybody else is saying he's dead. So
Yeah.
they need to make Lottie into the religious figure and for everybody to follow her. So I think Javi is going to be found alive.
No, that seems to be pretty likely. And I think what and this is I'm getting this based on footage that was in trailers from season 1 that we never saw in season 1, showing like a long stairs with like candles descending. And I think it's Lottie walking down those stairs in the shot, and she's wearing like her like white gown. And that never showed up in season 1. But I think what they're going to find on the mountain is that there's a mine there or something. And that is going to be, and that there's going to be some kind of like vault or like or hatch, because it's this, like Lost, unfortunately. And that's where Javi's going to be surviving. Because I don't know, either that or he's like running away. Because like I get the impression in season, like, I haven't seen episode 2, so I don't know, but that like patch of melted snow, like showing that someone had been sleeping there. So I don't. He's got to be out there.
Yeah, he's out there.
But yeah, like my wonder, if I have one, I guess, is whether or not like Javi's going to show up in the present day, because his brother got murdered. And is he going to have revenge on his mind? Did he maybe have something to do with it? I don't know. Maybe episode 2 would tell me. Does it?
It doesn't. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, it doesn't. All right. Well,
Although they do revisit Travis's death in episode 2. So yeah, look forward to that. That is one of the really, really bonkers scenes of episode 2. But so yeah, I mean, I guess to kind of cap this off, anybody who watched episode 1 definitely watch episode 2, because I do really feel like after I watched episode 1, I was a little bit down on the show, and then once I saw episode 2, I was like, okay, we're back now.
Yeah.
This is like Yellowjackets season 1 territory now.
We're not just treading water, even though
Yeah.
season 1 did unfortunately tread water quite a bit in the middle, as I recall. So I have faith that they're gonna start putting pedal to the metal more frequently, because it did leave me somewhat wanting, and I'm like, they should have just done a 2-hour premiere and just like put it all out on Front Street. Give the people what they want. That's what we say at Theater and Stream. And talking about giving the people what they want, that's what Dirty Harry kind of did. Our boy Don Siegel, directed it, produced it, but really it is the full company of all the artists involved in this. You got Eastwood as the actor. You got that whole horde of ghostwriters involved in this project. It's absurd, the names that were involved in this. But like, you really got to give John Milius the credit for making this character the right-wing boogeyman anti-hero that he is. Because there is a lot of rhetoric about how fascistic this movie is and how despicable its moral message is. But when I look at what they're taking issue with, and what the events and plots of this movie is built around, you have this person who is willing to murder priests and children and innocents, and then we're supposed to care that maybe he got assaulted by a policeman whose nickname is Dirty Harry because he's one of the most corrupt pig cops in the force in San Francisco. I don't think we really should care. But look how beautiful San Francisco looks back then. And then compare it to now. What kind of law and order policy better created a more clean and comfortable and safe place to live. I'm being only a little facetious and jokey here. But the reality is, I don't find the morals of this movie despicable, especially in the light of day when I can watch real policemen's body camera footage as they run into a school and fold a school shooter, in less than 15 minutes. That's the kind of person you want out there. You want Dirty Harrys on the street sitting at a hot dog shop, and knowing before they've even sat down that they're going to have to walk outside and create a massive action movie shootout and then walk away with just some buckshot on your leg. You gotta have those people on that wall. You need to have a few good men in this world, even if they are bad people. And Harry Callahan, maybe not a bad person, not the best, but he's the hero that the 70s needed. And he set the tone for all kinds of different characters over the years. The anti-hero, the anti-authoritarian, you don't have John Wick, which was our first, numbered review under this, title, unless you have Dirty Harry to begin with, because you don't have Death Wish unless you have Dirty Harry. I guess, unless I'm wrong about which one came first. But there's,
correct.
Yeah, you don't have all sorts of things. You don't have, Judge Dredd, is just the complete, it satirizes Dirty Harry, obviously, because the people who made this movie had a worldview very different from the critics of the time and very, very different from the critics of today. So there might not be a future within, cinema to appreciate this movie, but I think people should just watch it, enjoy it for what it is. I ducked my toes into politics because I couldn't help myself as I was watching it. There was too many current events swirling around in my head too, and I could only see the through line. But this is, groovy, it's entertaining, and it is a little stuffy here and there, but you really get the sense of a greatest generation old head filmmaker realizing how fun and hip and cool he really could be, when he made a movie. And I look forward to seeing more from the guy as we continue our retrospective. But what was your thoughts coming out of this?
Yeah, I mean, same. I really, really enjoyed this. I was remarking to Chuck before we started that I think I have only ever seen this movie in bits and pieces on TV edits throughout the years. And so it was nice to sit down and finally watch it. And, I think to appreciate Dirty Harry, to recognize Dirty Harry as a good movie, you have to be sort of a student of film history, because this film did so much for action movies along with the movies that came out around it, such as Bullet and The French Connection. And these three movies did so much for these action films around the time, because you look at action films before this and they're so cheesy and they're so static, and the guys are punching each other but they're a foot away from connecting, and then there's the sound effects, the really cheesy womp sound effects when they hit each other. And so yeah, this really was a step forward for not being cheesy and being really realistic and grounded in reality. And you have to think of this in a way of Don Siegel's career was so reinvigorated by the ending of the Hays Code in Hollywood, where, the Hays Code ended in 1968, which, for people who don't know, is basically the really, really strict, censorship laws that were on films from, I believe, the late 40s to the late 60s. And in 1968, that was all repealed, and all these filmmakers were really come out of awesome movies. And this is kind of an example of that, where we're going to be looking here at the three movies that we're going to be reviewing for this Don Siegel retrospective at the golden age of this guy's career, which is strangely enough when he was like middle age, when he was like above middle age, that was the golden age of this guy's career. So great movie. If you want to watch this movie and screech about how it doesn't like line up with today's politics, I guess you can do that, but you really have to have the maturity to be able to watch something like this and realize kind of where the world was, or where America was politically, and where stuff like civil rights was, stuff like who was running the country at the time. You just have to have the maturity to realize that things were different, and that's it. And you can still appreciate it beyond that, even if you disagree with it. And that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Because to this movie's credit, it gives an authentic view of what San Francisco was at that time. It was a very diverse. It doesn't try and obscure the fact that gay people are there. You know what I mean? Like there's that one couple who are like on a date eating ice cream in the park while Scorpio is tracking them. But was it wrong of them to be so inspired by the Zodiac? And like that whole situation with him threatening, sending letters and trying to shake down the authorities and whatnot to give him what he wanted, but that terror was still out there. Like this kind of thing really freaked people out. And if Zodiac had actually delivered on the true terrorizing threats that Zodiac had made, like blowing up school buses, I don't know, like what was it? Was that too soon? Was it too close to home? Or is that part of its power?
Yeah, I mean, it probably was, because, you have to think that when this movie came out, Zodiac was still like a very real threat, because, people, we still don't know who he was, like, for sure. And so, but when this film came out, he was still out there, probably, more than likely. He was still out there. Maybe he even saw this movie and loved it because he saw himself. And I think it adds to the effectiveness of the film, really, because people were so terrified by serial killers in the 70s, between late 60s, early 70s, Zodiac and the Night Stalker, or the original Night Stalker, and all the other serial killers who were just kind of working their way up and down the California coast. And it was, I'm sure, a very, very real threat for people, because they weren't caught back then, because, stuff like, DNA evidence, surveillance, all that stuff hadn't come along yet. And so, yeah, I'm sure it was fucking like terrifying seeing this movie back then.
And so in a way, part of the appeal and a part of like how people confront their genuine fears of the real world is they go to these movies. That is how you confront the things you're scared about. And so, yeah, I was really appreciative of that, because for a long time, my only frame of reference for Dirty Harry, like you, was, Spike TV, broadcasts, or that snippet within the movie Zodiac where Mark Ruffalo's character like can't stand to be in the theater for 5 more minutes because he's seeing what Hollywood has done with him. So in that way, it is interesting. I'd like to put those two movies together like that. But I want to just talk about the dynamism of the filmmaking here. Because, yeah, instead of being stuffy and like locked down, they do really crazy things within the camera. What did you think of that bank robbery sequence? How tight was that?
You're thinking, did he
that should be like taught in school. Like, I don't know film schools, but I think that's pretty much like how they wrote the book right there.
Yeah, that scene is amazing. I mean, the thing that really stood out to me in that scene was how like far down the street the action goes, or like how much they considered for that scene, because there's many shots in that scene that are clearly shot from above or shot from like a window of a building, and you can just look down the street and you can see people moving about their day. You can see cars, you can see bystanders, you can see people reacting to what's going on. And nowadays, for a scene like that, they'd lock down one square block, they'd throw up a green screen, and then green screen all the background stuff, and call it a day. And for this, they like locked down like 3 city blocks, and filled them with people, and filled them with cars, and filled them with people. Newspaper people or people going about their day, and it's just there's so much considered in that scene.
You've got a right to kick down doors,
and everything's real. Like you said, there's actually people milling about. Local yokels got to be for a day because they happen to be shooting in their neighborhood. And that's the kind of thing that doesn't happen in theater things anymore. And oh, dang it. I think, unfortunately, I had some audio running, so I might have fucked up the episode a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. But another sequence worth highlighting, of course, is the opening. The rooftop in San Francisco there, where it just slowly gets to, the moment, just with very subtle editing. And that, I don't know, the editing in this movie was also very impressive. But what did you actually think of Clint Eastwood's performance as Harry Callahan? Like, did it remind you too much of his other, stuff that he had done in the past?
I don't think so. I mean, he's definitely saying a lot more than he ever did as Blondie or anybody in one of the Sergio Leone movies, but so yeah, I think it's a different enough character. He's clearly like just entering middle age because you can tell he's a little older in this movie than some of his other ones. And but yeah, I thought he was pretty decent. I mean, I love like the little bits of sort of humor that he does throughout the movie, like the weird like peeping Tom scene where he's looking through the binoculars and there's like that woman in her apartment, and I guess I wasn't really sure what's going on there. Is it like the setup to like a threesome? Is that, or like a porno shoot, or what was going on
something
there?
like that, yeah. Like there was something kinky going on.
Yeah, so I mean, just stuff like that. And there's a lot of like, I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a lot of like Christ-like imagery around his character, where like
when he's getting beaten at the foot of that giant cross.
Yeah, that, and like the giant neon sign that says Jesus saves, and it's very, very, very interesting.
Because Jesus would say, "Hey Harry, man, why you gotta murder, dude? Like, come on." And I guess that is kind of like why the morals of the character are so repugnant, because like a devout Christian would not be okay with Harry Callahan doing what he's doing, and yet he is the only one you're standing up for Christendom. Yeah, that is a weird little like symbolism to put in there. Oh my god.
Well, it's strange because like we are told, we are outright told by his like one of his superiors that he's a racist. Like Harry Callahan is a racist, but it's interesting how we're only told that, but we're not shown that. Like all of his actions throughout the movie are for some people that's enough. Like if somebody says that in a movie, that's enough for some people to go, fuck this guy.
Especially in 1970, like what was race? Yeah, like there was a lot of you were given a lot of leeway back then.
Mm-hmm. And so, but he never actually, from what I can recall anyways, he doesn't do anything. We're never shown that racism. Like he's fine with his partner, his Mexican partner.
Yeah, because he balks at having a partner, period. He's like, hey, people work with me and they die, man. Like, don't give him to me. And then, because he's right, because he gets shot. And then he becomes a teacher. He saves his life.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's interesting in that way and then he also, I think the guy also remarks that he's like an equal opportunity racist. And I noticed that there's a scene in the movie. It's one of those nighttime scenes when they're running through the street, and he runs into a guy and he says like, "Get out of my way, hammerhead."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, what is that? Like, I've never heard that before. Like, what is that? What does that term mean? What does that slang mean? And so I looked it up, and it's a like slur for a Scandinavian American. So it's interesting how he really doesn't give a fuck. I mean, he doesn't like anybody, and that's kind of, I don't know, that's the point at which I'm willing to say that this movie is politically incorrect.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's outright racist.
Yeah, it's just edgy. You know, like it's like it's like Sam Hyde. You know, it's $1 Million Extreme or whatever. But it's more transgressive and worthwhile than, like, you know, what's that Daily Wire movie? What the school shooting movie? Like, what is it? Like Run, Hide, Fight? That's what it's called. Yeah, like that just screams to, you know, insipid and weird. I don't know. I actually haven't seen it, so I really shouldn't judge it. But, you know, in here, it rings more genuine. And I think that's because of the people who wrote on this. I know we had their names up there, but
yeah,
what the fuck, man? Like, how do you have all of those people work on a script and not give them credit?
Yeah, it's interesting because the movie has 3 credited writers, including a husband and wife team of writers. See, their names were Harry Fink and R.M. Fink, and that was like a husband and wife writing partners. They worked a lot with Siegel. We might see their names come up again in the other movies that we do.
We don't want to put a naked baby on the camera. Hang on. Okay, let's walk
and then,
over here.
So what Chuck was referring to is Terrence Malick did an uncredited rewrite on this film, where they threw out a lot of his ideas. Apparently Malick apparently he wanted the killer to be like a more motivated killer who would go after rich people that have gotten away with crimes.
Oh, so kind of make him a hero, huh? Is that what I'm hearing here?
Yeah. And
that's interesting.
What's interesting is they actually used a lot of Malick's ideas for the sequel to Dirty Harry. So
which one was that? Like Sudden Impact?
Is it Magnum Force?
Magnum Force, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Magnum Force. And so they did actually end up using a lot of Malick's ideas for the sequel. But then also, as you said earlier, John Milius did a rewrite of the movie. Actually, not so much a rewrite, but he essentially punched up the film's dialogue. He's responsible for the "Do you feel lucky" punk scene, and he's responsible for a lot of the dialogue in the film. So
the iconics, and that gun is John Milius's gun.
Is it really?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's in a museum now. But yeah, like that's how much he contributed to the line, and they were like, "Well, we're filmmakers. We don't know what these guns are." And he's like, "Well, here, I have one. Take it." And now it's in a museum. Yeah, I got a kick out of that particular fact. But what I found shocking in looking at the reaction to the movie was that, because like Sam Peckinpah was a Don Siegel like understudy. He was his like montage director and things like that. And he was totally like pearl clutching about this movie, despite, you know, loving it. You know, he still couldn't believe that such a terrible piece of trash could, you know, have been made by someone he respected. But I don't know, like, I don't know how you could call this movie trash at any time. Like, it had so much substance, you know, to it, and it challenges now. I'm sure it challenged then, and yet it's an influential action movie. You know, it made Clint Eastwood like a proper action movie star, to the point that he was still making these movies until he was like 60.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it's interesting because, like, I think that there's a lot of people when this film came out, because it was so highly regarded by the public and it was so popular, that there's a lot of critics that, you know, with one eye they want to, you know, watch the film, and then with the other eye they want to keep it closed while they're writing their essay about why the movie's bad. And so I don't know, it just reminds me like a lot of like they have to acknowledge that it is good, but at the same time they want to be like appalled by it, but they can't 100% be appalled by it. It kind of reminds me of, like, we were talking earlier about Succession, and when Succession first started in its first season, I remember there was people, and you know who you are, because there was a lot of people out there that didn't like the show or pretended like they didn't like the show at first, because they were all like, why would I want to watch rich people be horrible? This show sucks, and there was numerous like essays and like think pieces written about it. And then at a certain point, those people had to go out and delete those and change their opinion because it's so highly regarded. And that's like the exact same situation with this movie.
And I think if you looked at the totality of both of their careers, the star and the filmmaker behind this, did he work on other Dirty Harry movies, like all of them, or just a few of them?
Siegel?
Yeah,
I think just this one.
Just this one. Okay.
Yeah,
because he still had a very prolific partnership with Eastwood going forward. And worked with a lot of other, really important and prominent filmmakers and actors and whatnot. And he an underappreciated dude. Like I was really sleeping on this guy, and maybe it was just because his name was Don. I don't know. But I also haven't seen enough 70s film. That is my blind spot. Because believe it or not, I've seen a lot of like black and white old shit. Like my parents were really into that when we first got Netflix. I even saw the Philadelphia Story. Have you ever seen that movie? It's really boring.
I haven't, no.
But it would best pick. But that's what I love about the 70s. It's like, this is where cinema really grew up.
Yes.
This is where like the Image Comics revolution happened. This is where all the good stuff really started coming to the fore. But like what I appreciate about this is how it had its feet still in the past a little bit. Even though it was, also taking strides and playing with what was possible, with the format and with the genre even. So I'm really glad that we selected, this one for our retrospective.
Yeah, same. I did want to touch on, I think one of the other like big puzzle pieces of this film is Andrew Robinson's performance as the killer. And he's just fantastic. I mean, that guy, I don't know, you've seen Hellraiser, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same guy from I think he plays Larry in Hellraiser.
Yeah.
And he has such a unique face where he doesn't have the look of a serial killer, but when he's like in the middle of a fit, you can totally see it. And you already alluded to the scene, but the scene that really sold me on his acting was the scene where he's like spying on the two gay guys in the park with his scope, his rifle scope. And there's a moment in that scene where he loses sight of them because they walk in front of some trees, and he just starts like having a little meltdown because he can't see them anymore, because he can't acquire them in his scope anymore. And then 30 seconds later they come back into view and everything's okay again.
Yeah,
and he's fine. And so I don't know, that scene really sold me on him. And yeah, he was fantastic. And so I did want to give a shout out to him. And
because you actually get to live in those moments with them. Like that's like this, you can tell that this movie was made in the past because there's not 1,000 cuts and a bunch of quippy dialogue, bashing your head in every 5 seconds. You get settled into scenes. Like you're actually like in this dude's day where he's like, oh, I had a long day, time to go get my usual lunch, after clocking out. And you go through every step of that process. Or like with Scorpio, when he's just doing his thing and like, trying to find his next victim, you get settled into moments. And it's not just moving on to the next thing every like second, every frame of this thing. So it appreciate the techniques of the past and the aesthetics of the past because they are immune to the blob product that we're getting out of everybody else. Like, I don't know, like I haven't seen the Russo brothers' other work outside of Marvel. I haven't seen The Gray Man. But does The Gray Man give you the impression that we could have like that kind of like action movie again, or does it still just feel like a Marvel movie?
Yeah, the Gray Man's
This
not
is a
good.
sidebar, but it's pertinent to, I guess, the qualities that I'm like appreciating, I guess.
Yeah. I don't think The Gray Man was very good. I've seen both The Gray Man and then also their Apple TV Plus movie that they did called Cherry with
Yeah.
Spider-Man, and I thought that was a little better because it was more unique. But yeah, I mean, I think if you want to make a comparison to, the more interesting action films that are coming out in more recent times, I would probably point to like, Mad Max Fury Road or something like that, where, that's something that was so unique and so different and nobody expected it. And that's kind of the parallel I would draw as far as modern action movies go. But then you have to, you really have to think about it. And that movie was like 7 years ago. So it's like,
and it was like 15 in the making too. Like that was the other part of that story.
So we don't get stuff like that you can draw parallels to this very often anymore.
Which is unfortunate because I compare like a modern remake of a classic like RoboCop to its original incarnation, and I am fucking glad. I'm knocking on wood. Hollywood better not make another Dirty Harry movie. Don't do it. Leave the man alone. He has served. He has been counted. We have already like sent his body off on the bonfire boat. Like this is a part of pop culture that should remain rooted in what it was. It doesn't need our postmodern lens to turn it into something completely other from what it was. It's like it needed to be like it's a relic of its time for a reason, and it shouldn't just be tossed out. Like even though I'm sure a lot of people are ready to, because I can only imagine the kind of tripe they would make if they put like I don't even want to speculate about who they would put in charge of a Dirty Harry remake, let alone who they would have star. But I feel like it would kill Clint Eastwood. He's not going to make it to his last, movie. He would just, he would just grab that gun and just, unlife himself or something. But,
well, let's, I guess as we sort of
wind down,
close out here, let's pull on that thread a bit. Do you think that this film is really destined to lose its iconic status in, say, the next 20, 30 years because of its politics or because of its, the impressions people gather from it? Because I feel as if this movie was talked a lot more about in the past, and it was more highly regarded in the past. And I feel like that's fallen off a bit in recent years. And I really wonder, if there's ever going to be a point where people like just get to the point where they want to forget about it and they don't even want to acknowledge it in any aspect. Like, it turns into like the equivalent of like Birth of a Nation or something like that, where people don't even want to. I mean, there's a lot of problems with that film, but people don't even want to regard that film in any way. People don't even want to hear that it exists nowadays. Like they don't want to see it, they don't want to hear it, they don't want to acknowledge its presence. And do you think that we'll ever get to that point with this film?
I think it's it's either quite likely or not likely at all, which is it's a superposition because of how modern politics are. You would think it would lose influence and lose relevance, but this is also one of those situations where if it's available and people can rediscover it, I could easily see modern audiences really grabbing hold of a good old Harry Callahan and making him their own again and caring about him again. It just would take, all it would take is the right influencer. Like you just have to have Ben Shapiro talk about Harry Callahan on his YouTube show or something, and before you know it, people are going to be banging down their streamer's door to watch this, and the algorithm is going to get all out of whack because they were shifting Harry Callahan to the dump section, and all of his move. But then we're going to get a nice Blu-ray 4K package release. And then they're going to start thinking about remaking it because they want that right-wing audience. And that is who this is going to appeal to, if it's going to appeal to anybody. But even at the same time, I think he is even measured compared to the rhetoric from some people today. If I could see, I don't know. I think people need to be more open. I just want more people to enjoy the movie. Just watch it.
Yeah.
Leave your bullshit at the door. It'll come back up, when you walk out of the theater, but just watch that man mouth his hot dog as he kills a bunch of guys. It's awesome. Mentionables. Is that, what movie are we doing next? It's
Shootist.
The Shootist, starring John Wayne for Don Siegel. So if you care about that, look that up and watch along with us. But for the Mentionables this week, we have sad news. Because, yet again, we're not going to have E3? That cultural institution? Like, where are the booth babes going for work? Oh, they're all on OnlyFans now.
Yeah, I mean, this a little bit something different from me this week, where, this week it spelled the end for E3, essentially. E3 was the big video game show that happened every June in LA, and essentially partly due to COVID and then partly due to every video game company realizing that they can just put out live streams, the show has kind of died. And they announced that this year it's pretty much done. It's donezo. It's not coming back. It was supposed to this year, but one by one, all of the companies started pulling out in the last week or so. And so this is sort of a mentionable in two parts. The first part is just kind of a dedication to the show. I always enjoyed watching it on, back in the day, watching it on G4 TV, on cable TV. And then more recently, just watching the streams of the press conferences on YouTube. You got a shitload, you got a year's worth of video game news in the span of 3 days, and it was always awesome. But my favorite part, and this is the second part of the mentionable, favorite part every year was sort of the cringe factor of E3 press conferences, because you put these, awkward, nerdy people up on a stage, and they make jokes that miss all the time. They do like weird things. There's technical difficulties. There's,
I watched some of these moments live and died inside the whole time.
Yeah. And so it's just, it's amazing to watch, because we don't get stuff like this with these new sort of pre-canned live streams that all the video game companies do now. And so go on YouTube and just search E3 cringe compilation, because that's my real mentionable here, because you can watch any of them. They're all good. They're usually arranged by the year that they came out in, and they are incredible. Just the funniest things ever. And my personal favorite is when Bethesda had an Andrew WK concert during their press conference, and everyone in the crowd just sat there stone-faced, and because they didn't know what to do, because it's Andrew WK, and it was just,
you got to be in
hilarious.
the mood for that, man. You have to be a few keg stands deep before Andrew WK sounds like a good idea, especially if you've been walking around a show floor and being around a bunch of strangers all day long. God, yeah. So shout out to Longo Coney, because that's the one that I pulled from, and I am gonna miss all of these things. I remember being on my computer, my family computer, staying up late into the night because I wanted to see the announcement of whatever the revolution was, and how big of a deal it was when I think it was Iwata just like holds up the Wii for the first time, and your jaw drops, because you had seen what Sony and Microsoft had been putting out, and there were these behemoths, the 360 and the PS3 at that time, and then like the console wars, like there was the GameSpot coverage of of all of this was always a place I went to as well, and game trailers and G4 and all that whole world is just nostalgic for it, but also at the same time, I'm glad I don't spend a lot of my time on these websites anymore. My mentionable is a little more low-key, also a little weird. I had bought this a long time ago and forgotten about it, but I went to a thrift shop in Bismarck, and I found this self-published book called World War 2.5 Spit Weasel Survives. and just look at that. I know it's a little blurry, but look at that magnificent man. That man, his name is Wayne Garing. I don't know if he's still living, but you can see the old IBM like gateway computer that he wrote this book in behind, like in this promo image. And this was written after 9/11, and it is written in the most stilted, awful style, but it was worth the read just because I knew that some weirdo in the year 2002 had decided he was going to do this. This is how it begins. God, it's great out here. The sun poured out of the sky and singed his open body. He lay there in his nylon patio chair, arms stretched over his head in a wide V shape, his legs extended like a ballet dancer. He maximized his stretch while the sun rays seemed to find and infiltrate every tiny pocket and crevice of his body. And somehow this is about, terrorism and the end of the United States and how you have to, save your rainwater to fight the man. You can buy it for $35 on Amazon. I spent $1 on this thing, so maybe you're better off not. But yeah, Spit Weasel survives. Whoa, I just threw it. I don't care. I'm not going to read it ever again, and neither should you.
It's a good thing. It's a good conversation piece.
Exactly.
Put it on your shelf.
I also have this really cool thing that I should show off that this guy made. It was like in like the 60s or the 70s, I swear. Like where it's like drawings of nice rocks I found. And it's like, who does this? What was your pick of the week?
Oh man, it's got to be Succession, I think. This is the beginning of the end, people. And it's if you're not on the Succession train already, jump on now, because this is the show where the second that the finale is done with, it's going to be like, does Tony Soprano live or die levels of spoilers that are going to be out there. I know, like, people are just immediately going to spoil the hell out of it. And so if you're not on the Succession train, there's still time. The actual finale isn't for another 9 weeks. You can blaze through the first 30 episodes of the show between now and then. So do it.
Absolutely. Just because I know this is what I'm going to watch as soon as we're done here, and I try and clean up my audio flub from the beginning of the Dirty Harry segment, I think we all should just be watching Yellowjackets, especially now that I know the second episode is unhinged. Because I've read Spit Weasel. I can handle anything at this point, but I'm willing to test that. We are Theater and Stream. Thank you all for watching, joining us, and we'll be back here next week to talk about Don Siegel's The Shootist. Thank you, Matt, for joining me, and everybody have a good week.
Yep. See ya.